Welcome back, my dear students. So, today we are starting with the third chapter, that is biogeochemical cycle, and today we are starting with nitrogen cycle. So, let's move. What is meant by nitrogen cycle? Before going to the nitrogen cycle definition, we want to know what is the chemical element and how it is useful for our living system. We know that nitrogen is an important component of our atmospheric air, which constitute about 79%. That is the most abundant chemical element in our air. And how it is useful. This is very essential for the synthesis of amino acids, proteins, purines, pyrimidines, nucleic acids, nucleotide, as well as vitamins. So for all the synthesis of, for the formation of all these things, we need nitrogen. Then what is the definition of nitrogen cycle? We know that this is a cycle. The nitrogen cycle can be defined as a cyclic back and forth movement of nitrogen, the chemical element nitrogen, between atmosphere and the living organisms. For more clearly, it involves the fixation of atmospheric nitrogen into the nitrogenous compounds that can be used by the living system like the plants and animals, and the release of this molecular nitrogen, which is found by the breakdown of this nitrogen compounds, back into the atmosphere for repeating the cycle once again. So this is called the nitrogen cycle. Nothing but it is a back and forth movement of nitrogen between living and non-living component, or the non-living components of the ecosystem. Then what are the stages of nitrogen cycle? What does generally happen during nitrogen cycle? The first stage is the flow of nitrogen. The molecular nitrogen, or the nitrogen which is exists in the air, cannot be used by any organism in our earth except microorganism. Certain nitrogen fixes are dwelling in our earth for converting this molecular nitrogen into the corresponding nitrogenous compounds. So the first stage is also called a nitrogen fixation, and this is done by certain microorganism, that is called nitrogen fixes. In the second stage, the nitrogen fixes will convert this as the nitrogen into nitrogenous compounds, and they are delivered into the soil. In the third stage, the nitrogenous compounds now are in soil. So from the soil, these nitrogenous compounds are absorbed by plants, and that means the animals are mainly depends upon these plants for their energy requirements. It enters into these nitrogenous compounds, enters into the animals via food chain. Then after the decomposition and excretion of plants and animals, these nitrogenous compounds return back to the soil itself. Okay, then in the fifth stage, in this stage, there is a recycling of this nitrogen into a new generation of plants and animals. So if there is another generation of plants and animals, there occurs a recycling of this nitrogen, and finally all these nitrogenous compounds are returned back into the atmosphere as molecular nitrogen from the soil. So these are the 6 major steps or stages which occur in a nitrogen cycle. Then we can summarize these 6 stages into the following steps. That is, the first step is nitrogen fixation, second one is ammonification, third one is nitrification, then cycling of nitrates, then nitrate assimilation, replenishment of soil nitrogen, and the denitrification. So these are the 7 different stages which is generally found in a nitrogen cycle. So let's move to the detail of each one. First one is nitrogen fixation. I told you that fixing the molecular nitrogen into nitrogenous compounds, and generally there are 3 different types of fixations are available for fixing atmospheric nitrogen. They are industrial nitrogen fixation, non-biological nitrogen fixation, and biological nitrogen fixation. So let's move to the detail of each one. Industrial nitrogen fixation, as the name indicate, here we are synthesizing ammonia from molecular nitrogen, or we are fixing this nitrogen by utilizing hydrogen gas by providing this environment like 200 atmospheric pressure at 500 degrees centigrade with a nickel catalyst, we can convert or we can fix this nitrogen into 2 molecules of ammonia. This process is called a Haber-Bosch process. About 5% of nitrogen is generally fixed by means of this industrial nitrogen fixation. Then comes non-biological nitrogen fixation. About 10% of the nitrogen fixation is generally done by means of non-biological nitrogen fixation method. As the name indicates, this is a non-biological. There is no involvement of any kind of biological organisms for the nitrogen fixation. So how here the nitrogen is getting fixed by means of photochemical and electrochemical conversion of atmospheric nitrogen. They are converting nitrogen into soil, nitrate, nitrite and ammonia. We know that lightning, thunderstorms and volcanic eruption, right? So this will constitute the photochemical and electrochemical process. By means of all these things, they will provide high energy for breaking the triple bond which is existing between two nitrogen atom of a nitrogen molecule. Okay, so after the thunderstorm and lightning, this nitrogen is getting split into two nitrogen atoms, and these nitrogen atoms will react with the oxygen, forms the nitrogenous compounds. For example, nitrous oxide, here 2 molecules of nitrogen reacts with the oxygen atom, forms N2O, that is nitrous oxide, and one nitrogen atom and another oxygen atom reacts in the formation of nitric oxide, and this nitrogen when reacts with the N2 and reacts with the hydrogen gas, it results in the formation of ammonia. Okay, so nitrous and nitric oxide will be formed by means of this process, and in this oxides will react with the water vapor by means of the draining process and forming nitric as well as nitrous acid. Nitrous oxide will react with the water vapor forms nitric acid, and nitric oxide will react with the water vapor forms nitrous acid. And this non-biological nitrogen fixation is generally found in tropical region where thunderbolts are common. Okay. Then comes the biological nitrogen fixation. As the name indicates, this is generally done by microorganism, and about 70% of more than 70% of nitrogen is generally fixed by means of this biological nitrogen fixation. So the concerned microorganisms they are concerned with this nitrogen fixing are diazotrophs and nitrogen fixers. And we are dividing this biological nitrogen fixers into two different categories, non-symbiotic and symbiotic. I hope you understood what is meant by non-symbiotic and symbiotic. Non-symbiotic includes the nostoc, that is blue-green algae, Acetobacter and Clostridium. And symbiotic nitrogen fixing bacteria includes Anabaena, Columba and the leguminous those bacteria which is dwelling in the root nodules of leguminous plants, that is Rhizobium and Bradyrhizobium. Then what actually happened during this biological nitrogen fixation? First of all, we have to activate this molecular nitrogen, right? Here in the biological nitrogen fixation, the molecular nitrogen is getting activated by means of providing high energy, and this is generally done by this activation of nitrogen is generally done by two different enzymes which is dwelling in the body of these microorganisms, that is nitrogenase and hydrogenase. The nitrogenase will convert the molecular nitrogen into two nitrogen atoms, and this reaction is requiring high amount of energy, so this is an endergonic reaction. And the second stage, this two nitrogen atom will react with the third molecule of hydrogen atom, and by the presence of hydrogenase, 2 molecules of ammonia along with 13 kilocalories of energy is getting released. And as this reaction is releasing energy, this is an exergonic reaction. We know that for a reaction to occur more spontaneously, an endergonic as well as exergonic reaction has to be moved in a coupled manner. So out of this, about for 147 kilocalorie, that is 160 minus 13 kilocalorie, we get 147 kilocalories. So 147 kilocalorie along with the 60 molecules are generally needed for fixing this molecular nitrogen. So this is a first stage. Then ammonification. The nitrogen fixes will utilize this formed ammonia for synthesizing proteins, pigments and nucleic acids, and they are generally certain bacteria called ammonifying bacteria. They will utilize these kinds of amino acids into soil ammonia. Okay, for example, actinomyces, fungi and other bacteria are concerned with this ammonification process. Then this ammonification is actually an energy releasing reaction, so we can say that this is an exergonic process. Then comes bacterial nitrification. So after ammonification, bacterial nitrification generally happen. The soil ammonia, which is formed by means of ammonification, oxidized to cell nitrate into two steps. Here, nitrate into two steps. Here, what actually happens is that the ammonia is getting converted into nitrate. Okay, so two important steps are generally happen here, that is a nitrifying reaction and a nitrate reaction. This is generally done by nitrifying bacteria and this is generally done by nitrate bacteria. The nitrifying bacteria will convert ammonia into nitrate by means of oxidation, and the nitrate bacteria will convert this nitrate into nitrate by means of another oxidation reaction. This nitrification is generally done by Nitrosomonas and Nitrococcus bacteria, while nitrate formation is generally done by Nitrobacter bacteria. And this is the concerned reaction. This is a nitrification process, and this is a nitrifying bacteria conversion of ammonia into nitrate, and this is a nitrate reaction, that is conversion of nitrate to nitrate. Clear? Then comes the cycling of nitrates. So now from ammonia nitrates are formed. So these nitrates are now in the soil. From the soil, these soil nitrates are generally absorbed by the plants. Soil nitrate, which is produced by non-biological as well as the biological nitrogen fixation, forms the basis of source of nitrogen for non-nitrogen fixers. Actually, these kinds of nitrogen fixation is generally done by the nitrogen fixing bacteria. They first of all they fix the nitrogen, convert them into ammonia, then ammonia is getting converted into nitrate and nitrate compounds. These nitrate compounds are generally absorbed by those non-nitrate nitrogen fixers. Here what happens is that most of the nitrates are absorbed by the plants for the nitrate assimilation, and from there a small portion undergoes bacterial denitrification, thereby releasing nitrogen back into the atmosphere, and a small portion of this will be converted into ammonia by means of ammonification, and some amount of nitrates are generally lost to deep sediments by means of leaching. So this is the cycling of nitrates. Then comes the nitrate assimilation. So now the nitrates are formed. These nitrates get reduced into ammonia. This ammonia is generally used for the synthesis of amino acid, proteins, pigments and nucleic acid by the plants as well as animals. So this is the movement of nitrogen. Nitrogen is in the form of amino acids are moved from plants then into animals, and from animals it enters into the decomposers, right? Then comes the replenishment of soil nitrogen. So now in the body of plants, animals as well as animals and decomposers, the nitrogen is formed in the form of nitrates or ammonia. Now by means of their excretion as ammonia, urea and uric acid, and also by the decomposition of plants and animals, which is done by the ammodifying bacteria, nitrifying bacteria, the soil nitrogen enters. The nitrogen from the body of plants and animals again enters into the soil. Then by means of the bacterial denitrification, or the bacteria which is denitrifying bacteria which is dwelling in the soil, for example Pseudomonas, will convert this nitrate compounds into molecular nitrogen. They will convert nitrate into nitrate and the nitrate into molecular nitrogen, and this molecular nitrogen will be evaporated into the atmosphere, back into the atmosphere, and the whole cycle again gets repeated once again. I hope you understood. If you have any doubt, please do. Thank you.